Welcome to Lessons I Learned in Law, the podcast, powered by Heriot Brown in-house legal recruitment and hosted by me, Scott Brown. I'm the founder of Heriot Brown and I'm also a recovering lawyer. And if you don't know, I started this show in 2020 to create a resource that I would really have wanted when I entered the profession and what I could see myself looking for as I moved through the profession. Each week, I get to interview a leading voice in the legal profession to hear their story of how they've made it to the top of their game. These are honest and authentic career conversations which give you an idea of what it takes to reach the top and achieve success, whatever that might look like for you. Now, we do this by navigating each guest's top 3 lessons that they've learned in their career and how they've applied these. On each episode, I hope you'll take away valuable insights into what's happening in our guests' legal functions today and how they're navigating some of the biggest risks and challenges that they face. For Season 6, in line with our continued international growth at Heriot Brown, I'll be speaking with guests who have enjoyed a rich and varied international career. I'll be bringing you these conversations every Thursday, streaming on LinkedIn Live at 12 p.m. GMT, and it will be available to download across multiple platforms. So stay tuned. On today's show, I'm joined by Kate Southwell, who is General Counsel for Corporate and Commercial at Anglo American PLC. Now, I had an amazing chat. I first met Kate at our charity Burns Night in January. I was introduced by another contact in the mining space, and I was delighted when her and some of the team from Anglo joined us for the evening. So it was good to catch up with Kate, who has had a busy year, to say the least, which you'll hear more about. There has been a defence of a hostile bid from BHP, which has rocked the mining sector. So we loved hearing about her lessons that she'd learned just from that one experience. But she's got a rich history in started as a corporate M&A lawyer in London, has travelled and worked in a number of different jurisdictions, and that was really her prime focus for becoming an M&A lawyer back then, to give her that mobility internationally. So we chat about what it's like relocating and setting up somewhere new and taking on a new challenge. She relocated back to the UK last year to take on her current position and manages a big team at Anglo American. So lots in there. Her lessons are really well defined and crisp, and the big one that stood out for me around networking and the importance of that, not just for lawyers in private practice and at a senior level, but at a junior level as well. So lots to digest, and we'll dive right in. Hi, Kate. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Scott. It's good to see you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, really nice to see you again. We met for the first time in January at our Burns Night. So thank you for coming to that. It's nice to
the legendary Burns Night. Thank you so much for having me. It was a fantastic evening. It was great to meet you and your colleagues. Lots of fun.
How did you find it? Because you claim some Scottish heritage. How did it rank?
I think I actually did say to someone it was the most. I'm not just saying this. It was the most fun Burns Night I've ever been to. I brought along 2 of my colleagues, and let's just say we had a great time. We really enjoyed ourselves, and both of them I don't think had been to many Burns Nights before, so it was quite an experience for them, quite an education.
An eye opener, yeah. Definitely. That's what we like it to be for the uninitiated. So good. Well, nice to see you again, and thanks for joining me. So I've given a bit of an introduction as best as I can, and but it would be great to have if we start off with a bird's eye view of your current position and your role and responsibilities. That would be good to hear.
Fantastic, thank you. So my title at the moment is General Counsel, Corporate and Commercial for Anglo American PLC. And our legal team is structured with 3 general counsels. We have a general counsel of De Beers, a general counsel of Upstream, and then myself to divide and conquer. and we all report into the group legal director of legal and corporate affairs, Richard Price. And so my responsibilities include M&A, commercial work, global projects, ESG, and marketing, among other things. So it's a really broad portfolio. I've got teams in London, in Yorkshire, in South Africa, and in Singapore. Big team in Singapore, which is the marketing, the bulk of the marketing legal work we do out of our offices in Singapore. So it's a really global mandate, covering a really broad church of legal matters. So it's a really exciting role, and it's a fantastic team. And I joined Anglo just over a year ago. So I'm still learning, how to navigate this incredibly complex organization. But a lot of the legal team have been here a long time. And it's such a privilege to walk into people who really know what they're doing and, know how to do the job very well, because we do have a very, very complicated structure. We've got 2 subsidiaries that are also listed entities on the JSE. And we also own 85% of De Beers. So there's a lot of complexity and enormous group structure charts to navigate, to say the least. But yeah, very, very exciting time to join Anglo.
Keep you on your toes. Nice. Well, look forward to hearing more about it and some of the recent experiences you've had since joining there. But you're in Switzerland at the moment, so we're recording this in summer. And you moved to Anglo a year ago, you said, but that was a relocation to move back to the UK.
Yeah, I was actually in Switzerland for 12 years in total, which was one of those things that kind of took me by surprise when I added it all up. I've actually realised that I've spent more of my career overseas than I have in the UK. And that's, very intentional, I should add. But Switzerland was one of those places that I'd never really thought about living. But actually, when you get here, I think it's pretty incomparable in terms of the opportunities for outdoor sports and just the lifestyle. It's that perfect mix of sort of European sensible working hours and fantastic things to do in the evenings. Everyone's super sporty. So that was a huge attraction. But it's also this powerhouse, in finance and commodities in particular, in the NGO scene in Geneva. So there's a lot going on below the sleepy exterior. And I do find that a lot of my friends and actually fellow lawyers who have pursued careers here don't tend to leave, because it's such a nice place to live and work. And for me, I moved over 12 years ago from New York, big change. And now, I've had a family here, I got married here, and now we've moved back to the UK, which I'm really loving. But it's a big shift, and I do miss living in Switzerland. So it's lovely to be able to spend a bit of time in the summer here.
Nice. Yeah, lovely. Nice in the mountains. And you mentioned New York. And then before that, were you in Canada for a while?
I've worked for a number of Canadian mining companies. I haven't spent a huge amount of time in Canada, although I've worked in Toronto and Vancouver. I've spent a lot of time in the US because in my previous role, we had a mining project in Nevada. And before I moved to New York, I was in London in private practice. But I'd also spent time in Singapore and in different sort of offices in that law firm. So yeah, my career has always been very international, and that's very, very intentional. And it's one of the reasons why originally I started as a sort of corporate lawyer, because in some ways it's the most transferable. It's easy to sort of pick up an M&A deal almost anywhere in the world. So that was a very attractive piece of it.
Yeah, super interesting. What do you find like what's the most challenging thing about like up sticks and relocating? Like, what do you? I've done it relatively recently, but
it is different when you've got a family. I would say the admin kind of multiplies, and the complexity in terms of it's not just yourself you're thinking about. Obviously, thinking about schools and all these kind of different things that go with relocating other people for the sake of your job. I think the admin is always the worst bit, and there's inevitably many months of questioning your sanity when you're in rented accommodation, or you can't find the thing that you can't work out which box it's in. I'm sure I don't know if you're still in that phase. But it's very energizing, I think, to up sticks and sort of, start somewhere new and build those connections and relationships. And very quickly it can start to feel like home. So I think I do actually like putting myself, in that discomfort zone to try and do something a bit different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I suppose that move back to the UK must be the first time where you've maybe got more of a settled network anyway on arrival. And
exactly. It's more of a homecoming. It's definitely easier coming home than going places where you don't know anyone, or you don't know how the systems work.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, we'll jump into the lessons. If you could share lesson 1, please.
Sure. Well, I mean, this is obviously a completely unbiased view, but I genuinely think that having a non-linear career, however you want to define that, we can dig into, but it makes your career more interesting, but actually makes you much more valuable to the organizations that you work for. And for some reason, the legal profession, I think, I certainly was told, at an early age that this is the path that you will follow. You will study law, and then you will do your training contract, and then you will work at a law firm, and then you will make partner. The pinnacle of the legal career is to make partnership. And I think that's just a really old-fashioned concept, and it doesn't necessarily serve most people to think about their careers in that way. Mm-hmm. But we still talk about, PQE as that sort of defining, the longevity piece is the bit that means that you'll be good or better at the job than someone else, which again, it doesn't really reflect life experience or commercial experience. And my career has certainly taken me in lots of different directions that I didn't expect. And I think that's made me better at what I do. And so now, particularly in an in-house role, what you're actually looking for is someone who probably has done some interesting things. I love it if someone's done a commercial role or even something completely different. We've got someone on our team, actually, I think, who was a dentist. And, you can bring to this profession a whole lot of different perspectives. And again, I think that's what makes a good lawyer is if you can bring a different perspective that's not just being brainwashed through, the legal sort of sausage machine. And then when you're getting to an in-house role and you're looking at, business problems and trying to deal with a wide variety of people, again, that life experience or commercial experience is incredibly helpful. So I would just encourage people to not think that there is only one path. And of course, it requires a bit of flexibility and agility. And it may feel sometimes that there's a move sideways or a career break that's going to hold you back. But I would just encourage people to think of it as actually that could well be your superpower. That time that you've spent away teaching or doing something completely random will almost certainly have given you some skills that will be really transferable and really useful as a lawyer or as an in-house, lawyer in particular. And we shouldn't be afraid of, stepping off the sort of the partner track in particular. And that's not a definition of success, I think, anymore. For some people it is. And, we work with some incredible partners who are, literally at the top of their game. But I don't think that should be the definition of success or the only definition of success anymore.
Yeah, so it's profession that is very that is traditional in that sense. But I think there's so much more that a lawyer can take from not pigeonholing themselves, and I think enough people pigeonhole lawyers, so the lawyer's mindset is I'm a lawyer and one dimensional. Then it's hard to break that. What was the first? I guess where's the sort of, in terms of your career, what was the first sort of leap non-linear that you took, and in terms of learnings from that?
I mean, I think I was very, very focused on being an M&A lawyer, working on mega deals, ultimately trying to get partnership in a global law firm. I'm trying to think whether there was a sort of light bulb moment, but I certainly started to feel unsettled by the fact that I wasn't really sure that was for me. And then through different opportunities that came my way, I was sort of challenged to not think of myself as a corporate lawyer anymore. And I'll give you one example. So when I was my first role in-house was for a company called Nearstar in Zurich. That was the sort of the first move in Switzerland. And it was a mining company, and I was hired to do deals, to close deals. They were on a sort of an acquisitive bent, which was great. And then at some point, the deals were closed and we were looking to do other things. And one of the projects that came up was to redevelop a very old lead smelter in Australia. And what they needed was someone who had project management skills as well as legal skills and could kind of get down, arrange different pieces of project financing, bank financing. There were guarantees from government entities, etc. And I was sort of volunteered for it, certainly offered the opportunity, and people said, "Oh, we think you can do this." And I think it was only when I turned up that I realised that actually, I'm not a project finance lawyer, and I don't really know anything about working in Australia in this kind of context. And I also had to get really stuck into really complex community and environmental issues and, government relations issues, which again, I'd had zero experience in my previous career. And that was probably the light bulb moment that you realise, actually, I can probably do this with the right support and the right attitude. And it was really transformative for me. Firstly, it also really demonstrated to me what mining can do, what the redevelopment of projects in that space in big industry can do for communities, for the environment, etc. Like that sort of hit home being in that environment. But it was also that sense of versatility. Maybe I don't need to be just an M&A lawyer, and actually really being an M&A lawyer was just the foundation to growing into a much more generalist lawyer. And I mean, I would call myself a mining lawyer because I work for a mining company, but that means different things to different people. But I think of myself much more as a generalist now. And I like to think when something comes my way, like I'll try and take it on, or I'll think about how to staff it appropriately. But none of us should be afraid of taking on challenges outside our comfort zone, within reason, obviously. I'm not going to advise on Peruvian tax or whatever, but there's a lot of things that a general commercial awareness and the right attitude of curiosity can take you. And so that again, was a very kind of sidestep. I wasn't really sure. I was a bit worried about, being seen to be stepping away from the M&A work and where that might lead. But I think it's the attitude of saying yes to opportunities when they come up that will always kind of serve you. Again, partly because you'll be seen as someone who can be a bit more agile and adapt to what an organisation needs you to do. But also, I learned so much from that experience. It was fantastic.
Yeah, sounds good. How long did that last?
I was in Australia for about 3 to 4 months in the end. Oh, cool. And then I remained involved in the project. We ultimately had to get a General Counsel for Australia to take over. But it was a really great experience to see a project like that getting financed.
Yeah, and that project management mindset or skill set is the a corporate lawyer very well versed in that, and being able to handle and juggle a whole host of issues and problem solve and take advice from different areas within a firm. So it sets people up. I think it's a really good foundation for someone moving in-house into something broader than just doing M&A. In terms of managing people now in your position and that non-linear career path, how minded are you when you're recruiting or you're hiring people or moving people internally, looking at that versus, because I think hiring for a law firm is slightly different, right? They're looking for subject matter expertise and it is very linear. But I guess how much leeway do you have when you're looking at people versus someone that is just custom fitted to do the job and has always done it?
You're right. I mean, there has to be a balance, and obviously if you're hiring someone to be a competition lawyer, then you're going to need them to have a very, strong grounding in that subject matter. But I do find, and I've really tried, during my time with the team, to pivot towards a little bit more agility. And it's amazing what people can do when you challenge them. And they might not think of their insights as valuable because they have, because we're trained to think of ourselves as, well, unless I'm an expert in this, I can't advise on it. But, as you know, when you're in-house, inevitably you will be asked things that are not in your wheelhouse. And sometimes, the right answer is to find the right expert to ask the question of. But very often, what they need is a very commercial and common sense piece of thoughtful thinking. And we can provide that. And you cannot, in an in-house role, say, well, that's not my expertise and try someone else. We're about finding solutions. I sometimes say, it's the advice is part of it, but it's about being really solutions minded. And even if someone asks you something that immediately is not going to work, your challenge should be, I wonder if I can think about how I might be able to help, solve that problem. And again, the answer might not be that you found some creative loophole or some clever piece of the contract that no one else has seen. You might just come up with a really pragmatic and thoughtful solution because you have a different perspective. So again, that kind of solutions mindedness to me is more valuable than any kind of piece of paper that says you've been doing this for years. And I'm thankful because I do think from a hiring perspective, we do now have the ability to look a bit beyond the CV and to dig under the hood and say, what have you actually done? How can we, maximize the value of that experience within the team? We try not to be cookie cutter at all. And I think that the people in the team kind of reflect that diverse approach. Of course, some people have come straight from law firms, but a lot of people have done other things. And the other thing that I like to encourage where possible is that the lawyers should also kind of spend time within the business. Again, we structure ourselves so that where possible, we sit on the executive committees of a business to get closer to the actual people doing the work so that we're more integrated within the business. But I'd also encourage if there's secondment opportunities for people to take a non-legal role and then come back. Again, we shouldn't be afraid of that. And if they never come back, that's great too, because you've got someone who's probably fantastic, working elsewhere in the business. But I do think that, again, I think that makes you a better lawyer. And that's the one thing that I think in-house lawyers, can always improve is their understanding of the business and their commerciality, because that will make the advice that we give just so much better than anything else that they can get from someone who's not, got that knowledge of the business.
Yeah, I think it's like to have walked in someone's shoes as well just counts for so much when in that if you go into a conversation as a lawyer, it must count for a lot to say, well, I've sort of seen it from the other side, or you can at least showcase some of the capabilities that you've seen from that person's perspective, or even another, I guess, just a different commercial or different function. I think for me, like I would say, similarly with recruitment, it doesn't make a good legal recruiter to have been a lawyer, but it gives you a little bit of a head start and starts a conversation, and you've sort of seen it, and you can assimilate with people and have that connection. But it doesn't. It's a small percentage of the job, but gives a head start. So,
but that's such a great way of putting it. Is that if you can look at a problem that no doubt all of us kind of deal with, nice inbox of people asking for advice on things, and if you can look at a problem from the perspective of the person asking the question and think, well, how will they see this, and how does it feel like to them, and what are they worried about? Is the business that they're working for under pressure to deliver? Is he asking me this question because, he has a working capital issue that I can help solve somewhere else? Again, as you say, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and in your case, knowing the environment that the person's going to be likely going into, that sort of ability to just not just see an issue from, the clever lawyer perspective, but to see it from the business person's perspective, or whoever else you're dealing with, the client, the customer, or whoever it is so important. But not everyone thinks that that's the right way of solving problems. So I think
no, and I think it applies to everything. Like putting yourself in someone's shoes. You spoke about curiosity earlier, being like curious about someone else's opinion. it is, I think it's the differentiator between doing a good job and doing a great job. If I could work out how to put myself in the shoes of my kids when they're kicking off and having a tantrum, then life
there
would
you go.
be solved.
Yeah,
But
yeah, we'll
yeah,
try to work that out.
I struggle. I do struggle with that. But yeah, if I could be as good at that as I am at trying to put myself in a client's shoes or a lawyer's shoes, then yeah, life would be completed. Cool. And yeah, in terms of this year, Kate. So I'm keen to. There's been a big thing on your plate over the last 6 months or so with the well publicised hostile takeover, is that what I would call it, with BHP, but don't really want to touch on the details, but we'd love to hear what the experience was like, what the sort of team environment was like in that sort of situation, and what you learned from it.
Yeah, thank you. So it has been a very unprecedented, extraordinary time for us as a company, and certainly for me. It wasn't a takeover, just to be clear. So, I mean, it was an attempt. It was an unsolicited, very unsolicited offer for the company, and by its nature, these things come at you, and the pressure is on under the UK takeover rules because it starts, certain timelines that are very rigid, and also puts you immediately in a highly regulated environment, where literally, every text message and email and phone call has to be really thought through. Right. It was an extraordinary experience to be part of. I mean, thankfully, the legal team and the COSEC team get involved very, very quickly. And this is, pre anything becoming public. There's a very tight, small group of people that will be working very closely with the chairman and the board to ensure that we do, every step that we take tactically and also from a regulatory and legal perspective is thought through. So that experience, I mean, I have to say it was incredibly intense and pretty stressful. And also as someone who, wears sort of transparency as one of their core tenets, I found the secrecy part really difficult in my personal life as well as professionally, because before these things become public, it is imperative that it doesn't leak. So I was sort of working slightly insane hours, and my husband was thinking, this is a bit odd. What's happening, but why are you not telling me what's happening? And equally for my team, I really wanted to ensure that those who were not involved in the defence thought that everything was running, as normal. So we continued to do normal things and have ordinary meetings, etc. So balancing, juggling those two was pretty challenging. We had an amazing team of advisors, both in the UK and South Africa, which turned out to be one of the key battlegrounds in our defence. We also had 4, I think, teams of investment bankers at some point. So corralling all of those people, making sure that, again, everyone knew exactly what the do's and don'ts were from a takeover code perspective was incredibly important. And it was a real privilege to be part of it. Again, I feel like I learned a huge amount from the team. And then a big part of our defence was accelerating the implementation of a quite radical transformation agenda for the company. So we had to communicate that, explain that, get that out there, and then start working on that during the middle of the defence as well, to make sure that we could actually deliver what we were saying was our kind of counter narrative to where we thought there was greater value. I think there's a big sense of obligation and responsibility, especially when you're leading a team. Ultimately in that scenario, one of the outcomes is that you're going to get taken over, and that the company, as you know, is effectively going to cease to exist. And I was very conscious of that. I'm very conscious of the fact that this is a 100-year-old company with a really deep legacy and commitment to doing things properly. We hire, over sort of 90,000 people as employees and contractors, but obviously the knock-on effect of those operations is much broader than that in terms of the people that it supports. So So it was hard not to think of it in those kind of big terms. But I think what I always try and do is just break it down into, what can we control today? What is the focus? And keep everyone really focused on the job in hand, which was day to day, making sure that we ran, the best possible defense, that we were really good at communicating, really thoughtful about how we engaged with the advisors, how we kept the board up to date, etc. And I'm really proud of how the team pulled together during all the late nights. It was like trainee hours, which when you get to my age, you don't really bounce back quite as well at 4 o'clock in the morning as you used to. But again, with the right sort of support and advisors and really talented people, the outcome was great. We lived to fight another day. And I think the strategy that we announced was really compelling. The market sort of understood that we believe that we can deliver more value as an independent company than being bought. But for me and my team, I think it was also just an extraordinary learning experience. And one of those things that you just have to go through to get that experience, right? There's no other way of kind of learning it.
Yeah. What do you draw? What do you draw on in that situation? Like totally unprecedented environment to be in, and being thrust into that. Like, what experience? How do you leverage your connections or people that have been through it before that you knew? Or
there was a little bit of that, but you can't. Yeah, exactly. You have to be so careful about disclosure and who knows what. So, I would certainly lean on our lawyers internally and externally. And, if there was times where everyone was saying, oh God, this is, getting a bit hairy, we could talk to each other. I do think, again, once you've been through a couple of different crises, you start to sort of be able to, being calm and organised is always priority number one. And I think people look to the lawyers as well to just maintain that continuity, to say, okay, this is what we're going to do today and this is what we're going to do tomorrow, etc. So yeah, just always stepping back, taking a breather and reminding yourself, what's important: to go outside, to get a walk, to look after the team, make sure that people weren't getting, too burnt out, too tired. You cannot function unless you're eating, sleeping, at least having some degree of a personal life. Of course, it suffered a little bit, but yeah, I think those kind of foundations are always what you need to kind of draw on. But you're right. I hadn't been through that before, but I had been through a few crises. All of us went through COVID, and that was, in some ways, one of those experiences where you looked at the contracts and said, well, none of this works. What are we going to do now? Like, you've got a blank sheet of paper. In my previous role, we also dealt with a lot of sanctions issues, which again was sort of pretty hairy at times. And I think every crisis like that you go through, you build up that jar of, okay, I've got this. We just need to be really level-headed, because actually it's making mistakes, I think, that compromises the success of those kind of corporate activities. And thankfully, we were very, very tight, very controlled, very organised, as much as you can be. But every day you would wake up, partly because of the geographic location of the two parties. When you went to bed, you didn't really know what would be happening in Australia while you were asleep. So you did sort of wake up in the morning thinking, I wonder what today's going to bring. I'm fairly happy to be out of that intense period. But yeah, these are all learning experiences that, whatever happens in my future career, wherever I end up, I will draw on that and use that as a reference point.
I bet. Yeah, see, career defining in certain ways, or role defining.
Great for the team
awesome.
As well. Huh?
Yeah. How? What did you learn about the team in that? Coming out the back of that. It's relatively fresh, so yeah, these are reflections that might not have.
No, you're right. I think it is a deeply experienced team. It is a team. It's a team that really cares about each other. I think that's what I learned the most, and cares about the company that we work for. And that's not always the case in every organisation, but I do think that Anglo American has this amazing culture that people come here because they care about certain things, they share certain values. And it wasn't, as I say, it didn't feel like it was just an ordinary, well, we want to win, because we want to win. It felt like the purpose that we're all trying to work towards as a company was worth fighting for. And that part to me really hit home, that this is a company that people really care about, that they give an extraordinary amount of effort and themselves to day to day. So it's an incredible team. When you have that alignment of values and purpose, hopefully, it does allow you to achieve kind of extraordinary things. And with a very small team with limited resources and no sleep, you can do quite extraordinary things. So it's great.
Yeah. Dream team. Perfect. We'll move on to lesson 2.
Okay, lesson 2 is a funny one for me because it's a lesson, again, that I think I probably learned the hard way. My second lesson is that networking is work. And even the word networking, I know makes most people kind of cringe, and it makes them think of some really awkward, you're in a conference room and everyone's got a name tag, and, it can be perceived as that. And for me, networking is maybe sometimes that, but very, very rarely. Networking is about connections and relationships, and that is work. And again, in the legal profession, sometimes we judge ourselves by ticking things off our to-do list or being really clever in a negotiation, etc. We don't necessarily always give enough time to developing the relationships that will serve us both internally and externally throughout our careers, throughout our lives. And I remember being a junior lawyer, and I was aware of this thing, networking, and that I should probably be going to more events or be reaching out to people on LinkedIn, etc. And I really felt like I didn't have enough time. I remember thinking, when am I going to do this? I'm already working crazy hours. I'm not going to go to something in the evening because I'm too busy, or want to, see my friends that I haven't seen for weeks. It felt like this sort of mystical thing that I didn't really know how to do. And for me, one of the main things that happened was during COVID, although I think I'd been doing a little bit unintentionally beforehand, I really became aware of the possibilities that are out there to just make these connections and to build relationships wherever you are. So, even if geographically you're not somewhere that there's a lot of events happening, or, nothing appeals to you from a networking perspective, there will inevitably be things online. There'll be communities online, there'll be forums, webinars, etc. During COVID, I just kind of signed up to everything because, we were in that mindset of probably desperately not wanting to speak to the same people in your family all the time. So no offense to my family, but yeah, so I did it, and I intentionally kind of built that network that now is, I think, really, really powerful. To your point, supports you when you go through tough times or when you're looking to make difficult career decisions. They help you when you're looking for someone in your team. They help you when you've got a strategic problem that you maybe don't know how to solve. Like, again, those relationships and those connections, which I think you obviously do as part of this podcast, very intentionally, but that network that Harriet Brown has built is very special. And when you connect with people, like-minded people, or people that have a different view, but you learn something from them each time, like you'll never regret going for a coffee or having a chat with someone virtually who's doing something interesting. There'll always be some kind of nuggets that you can take from that. And so I guess my point is that networking is work. And also then that network that you bring has tremendous value to an organization, which, again, I don't know if we necessarily, nowadays I would look at someone's LinkedIn or see who they know or see what they've been doing in the space, if they've been writing articles, if they've been, if they've been out there, putting themselves out there intentionally. And it can be fun. And I know it's not for everyone, and some people don't enjoy LinkedIn or going to these events, but there's almost certainly something that you can do that will enlarge, your network, for want of a better word, not in a transactional way, not in a kind of, if I do this, then I might get a job with so-and-so, but just genuinely, really organically reaching out to people that you're interested in, or to have a job that you think that sounds interesting. and I've made such tremendous deep connections through that. So it's really, to me, it's such a important part, but it didn't come easily, I guess, is my point. I think no one kind of says to you, this is what you can do in your lunch break, or this is what you can do in the evenings. But soon it becomes very normal to just do it as part of work. So that's my point. I think networking is work.
Yeah. I think part of the problem for junior lawyers is there's no incentive, as far as I'm aware, that rewards it for junior lawyers. You're there, you're working billable hours, you're target driven by number of hours worked, moving on to the next deal if you're an M&A lawyer, moving on to the next thing, and it's extracurricular almost over and above your work, versus understanding law firms. It was one of my biggest frustrations, probably reflecting rather than actually at the time. But people are like, whoever goes into the legal profession, people have strengths and people have a stronger suite than others in certain areas, and are more interested in other things. And I just think if everyone's doing that one function and there's no time carved out for it, then it's never going to work. And then I also think there's no upside. People don't see an immediate upside in doing it, because it's not going to lead to the next promotion. If people are linear focused on getting to partnership, it's something that will take care of itself further down the line, and it's put on the back burner. Or you inherit institutional relationships if you're in a large enough firm, or whatever happens. And I think the other mistake is that people maybe get too focused on, and you touched on that, an immediate win from it, and thinking, right, that you have to have your overall why has to be broader than I'm looking for a job, or this might get an instruction for the firm, or it may improve this account. Then it's probably the wrong mindset to go into it, and there's a lot for paying it forward, and knowing that the touch points they're going to come, something's going to come good, and it's about increasing increasing the likelihood of serendipitous moments happening further down the line.
Absolutely.
And bringing that into your life, and by networking, it just increases that tenfold. That's my experience in it.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. I mean, it's funny because the law firms, in some ways, they and I don't want to disparage any of them, but in some ways they've sort of got their head around, pro bono often is sort of counted as billable hours, and it's that kind of mentality that I think needs to shift. That, as you say, if you're just focused on billable hours, then you're not out there building relationships that are going to be your future clients, that are going to be the people that you turn to in a crisis, or they're going to tell you that they've got this amazing person in their team that's looking for a new job. As you say, you really don't know where it will all lead. You might just end up good mates, and that's fantastic too, but it requires a bit of effort beyond, it's probably not on your to-do list at the moment, and it can get kind of pushed down day to day. But to me, it truly is what has made my career most interesting, is the people that I've met and what I've learned from all those different people. And they're not necessarily in a more kind of formal mentoring capacity, but there's definitely, people talk about having your personal board of directors. I mean, I don't really have that, but I've got just lots of people whose wisdom and advice I value, and I'm grateful for. And equally, if I can do anything to help them, then I'm always kind of able to help out. So yeah, it just sort of makes the world of work a lot more fun and collaborative.
Yeah,
which
much
I'm
more
up for.
fun. I think that's it. That's it. And it's so much easier than it was 15, 20 years ago, because everyone's got access to LinkedIn, everyone's on there to some extent, and it's easy to multiply that. So I think it's really good advice. Emma, actually, in our head of community, we've started running training courses for in-house lawyers as to how to network online and be more effective in that, and giving like a tool book for following a playbook effectively for this is how to carve out 15 minutes a day or however long you want, however prioritized you are, and follow these templates, which are very similar to how we train our consultants in our team as to how to network, obviously for different reasons. So yeah, and it's been really well received in the businesses that she's run that out. So
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Cool. What's been the biggest win you've had? So actually, that was a question I wanted to ask, because your network. So you trained at Sherman.
Mm-hmm.
Richard, did you know Richard Richard Price from your time at Sherman?
I did a little bit, although we didn't overlap. He was obviously a capital markets partner, and he was in Singapore, but not at the same time that I was in Singapore. So our paths didn't really cross, although clearly there's a lot of overlap and synergies, and we know a lot of the same people. Mm-hmm. And I guess maybe there's some there's a lot of strength in an alumni network. But yeah, it's also it's much broader than just the Sherman connection. And I just think you can stay in touch with university people or law school colleagues or whatever. It's a very personal thing, isn't it? And it will feel different to different people. Like some people might not want to spend their life out there, but you can still build those connections by email, right? You can have a sort of a very offline version of the relationships where you can just do it in person. But yeah, the law firm relationships I think are really strong. And obviously now it's A&O Sherman, and that's kind of evolved into something very different. But it's helpful to come from the same kind of firm, I suppose, culturally.
Yeah. Nice. All right, we'll move on swiftly to lesson 3.
Lesson 3 is the importance of integrity. And again, I think for lawyers that will mean different things, and we have ethical and professional obligations that we're all very aware of. It's linked, I think, to my second lesson, which is around knowing yourself, knowing your personal brand, knowing what you bring that's unique, and not deviating from that. And I include in that sort of personal brand piece the values that you hold, because it is a very competitive legal market. You will be able to shape your career in a certain way. You'll make decisions, but the one thing that you can sort of always control is the integrity piece. And for me, that touches on reputation, the deals that you've done, the way that you've done the deals, as well as the deals that you've done. And again, in our industry, that kind of stuff matters. I think it matters more and more. And there's less, thankfully, there's less tolerance of people who, are successful without having the right kind of values, although it's still, I guess in some spheres, it still exists. Don't be discouraged by people who might tell you that you have to change something about yourself, or might also ask you to modify some of your values to be successful. I think that integrity piece is really, really important as you carry through different roles, different careers, different organizations, and sort of preserve it and nurture it and be aware of it and use it to guide you in the decisions that you'll make throughout your career. And some of those may be sort of ethical, difficult decisions, but it's broader than that. Think about what your values are and what's most important to you, and then you can shape your career around that. And actually, Richard always says, if you look around you and the values that your organization holds are different to yours, you're probably not in the right organization. And it can be challenging at times to sort of make those decisions. But I do think that integrity piece is everything. I say to my team, every email, every interaction, every time you sort of go into a conference room and sit down, in a meeting, that's sort of, you are representing yourself, you're representing the legal team, you're representing the company at times. So that's important, but just always be mindful that integrity is a bit like trust. I think it can be eroded quite quickly. But again, the people that have it are really valuable to organizations, and generally I think will be more successful because they'll be able to kind of follow that their North Star personally through that. And the other piece of it is unfortunately, there probably will be times where you're in a situation where there's that sort of integrity or ethics, or, the discomfort that we sometimes feel in a situation where you're not comfortable with a decision that's been made or the way that a decision has been made. And again, I mean, thankfully, this hasn't happened to me, but it has happened to other people who I know really well. If something doesn't feel right, if it doesn't sit well, remember that if you don't speak up, you risk being associated with that decision or that organization for the rest of your career. And therefore, be really selective about who you work for and where you put your time and your energy, because it is valuable. And that integrity piece kind of goes with you as well. And I'm sure you've seen that, when some people kind of might leave an organization sooner than they expected, etc. But I think when it's for, the right reasons, that will always be kind of held up as something that we as lawyers really need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And it's a very personal question in terms of where your integrity and values sit. But I've always found that really helpful when it comes to making a difficult decision about maybe leaving somewhere or joining somewhere, or day to day, if someone's asking you to do something that doesn't sit well, probe a little bit further and don't be afraid of questioning or speaking out, because that is again the value that we have in our training, but also it will be something that sort of stands you in good stead throughout your career if you're known as someone with integrity.
Yeah, without doubt. And there's been, obviously well publicised instances in the press with the post office and other instances recently that I think have really focused the profession's mind on that as a whole in ethics and integrity. Like you touched on like company values, and like something we toy with as well, like what are our values as a recruitment business, and like redefine them, or at least reinforce them at the start of this year. But there's a difference between what's written on the wall and versus like what people live and breathe. How do you, or what's your advice for someone to get under the skin of like great, that's what's documented on a company's website, but how do you get a flavour for what are the values of that business? Are they implemented?
That's a great question. I mean, I think you could certainly ask for tangible examples of where those values have been either tested or demonstrated in recent, strategy or decision making. Some of the values are sort of a bit harder probably to pinpoint. But at Anglo American, for example, we talk a lot about innovation. We talk about sustainability and safety. Those are real pillars of what we do and how we do it. And you don't have to look very far to see that, the way that we are trying to be a mining company is quite extraordinary. We put sustainability at the forefront of everything that we do because we believe that mining, has a really important role to play and a responsibility in doing that, safely and responsibly and for the benefit of the communities that are around our operations. So I don't think you'd have to look too far, obviously completely unbiased, but to see, the values in action at Anglo American. But I think, I'll ask the question, which one, and sometimes, there is inevitably going to be trade-offs, and there's going to be times when it's harder to put those values into action into every decision. But I genuinely do think that, in every meeting and decision that we make, we do sort of question ourselves when we say, is this in line with our values, and is there a better way of doing this, or are we compromising something?
Do you think it's important to have like legal team like specifically have, or have you experienced where a legal function has its own set of values or its own principles that guide that function that are separate from the business?
Yeah, we've toyed with this a little bit, and I do definitely think that a legal function should sort of organize itself like a business unit and should think of itself as, as a business unit as well. And therefore, why wouldn't you have that sort of values and purpose statement? we do call ourselves a value accretive strategic partner to the business, which I think helps confirm a couple of things. First, that we always need to be delivering value and have a really commercial focus. So we do actually measure in terms of dollars how much value we think we've brought to the business. It's not quite, a P&L, but it's close. So we're encouraging ourselves to think of ourselves that way. And we also, we sort of evolve them, I think, on a more annual basis in terms of these are our priorities or values for this year. And then I don't necessarily think we should create more values because there's already 6 Anglo ones. So I think, people might start to get a bit fatigued.
Yeah, overkill.
But our corporate purpose is reimagining mining to improve people's lives. And there's a lot of work that legal can do to help drive that forward. So, again, there's many different talented lawyers and different roles within our team, but we're all kind of really focused on how we make the mining industry better, how we make our company better, and where the value is that the advice that we bring, and the solutions mindset that we bring. So I think that does resonate. And you probably see on other corporate websites. And I think actually law firms have started to build kind of values and purpose statements as well, which I think is a very good thing. And, even the exercise of asking yourself, like, what do we stand for, is always a really interesting conversation internally, and a really valuable one.
Definitely. And how, if it underpins what you do, then I think it's, your purpose is, as a service provider ourselves as well as a law firm, like your purpose is obviously to generate revenue, but there's a way of doing it and how you conduct yourself, which I think again pays it forward and it creates a more fulfilling environment for people to operate within. If you're at a dinner party and you're talking about your job, it's what you're most proud about in your role that you talk to people around?
I think I am most proud of leading a team of really exceptional business-focused lawyers for one of the world's most important mining companies. And what we're actually doing is enabling the energy transition globally. And I think when you start connecting the dots like that, people kind of understand the role that mining and metals has in delivering the energy transition, kind of brings it really to the forefront of people's consciousness. And then you can have a debate around electric vehicles or cobalt mining, or where we think we should be getting these materials from and whether or not they can be delivered sustainably. But that to me is the most exciting part of our role. But I also am most proud of the team that we have delivering this. For example, we have a team that just led the closing of a renewable energy infrastructure in South Africa with EDF NG. So they're building out the renewable energy ecosystem in Southern Africa. And that's something that will have a legacy impact for many, many years to come. So really tremendously proud of the team and the people that work on not just that project, but lots of projects like that are having a really positive impact on the world.
Yeah, amazing. That's a good note to finish on. Been amazing to chat and hear about your experience and all about the team at Anglo. So thank you for sharing your lessons with us.
Lovely to see you, Scott. Have a great summer. Take care.
Hi, thanks for listening to today's show of Lessons I Learned in Law, the podcast powered by Harriet Brown. I really hope you got some value from it. It's the real reason that I set up the podcast, to help you, our audience of in-house lawyers or people within the legal profession, to learn from others in the industry. At Harriet Brown, we're a legal recruitment business that is driven by a mission to help lawyers find fulfillment in their careers. For us, this extends well beyond the transactional aspect of helping you find a new job or finding hires for your legal team. Where we excel is bringing the best people together and the right people together, which is why community has always been at the heart of our business. We really try to add real value to our network. So to keep up to date with everything going on in our community, make sure you subscribe to Lessons I Learned in Law on your favourite podcast platform. And if you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review or share it with your friends and colleagues on social media. That would be much appreciated. Take care.